Welcome to another episode of Linen Suit and Plastic Tie. I'm Gaurav.
And I'm Kevin.
We're really excited to be back and bring you some amazing expert storytellers. Kev, who are we talking to today?
Well, today we are talking to Christopher Connolly. He is a veteran marketing executive. He has a broad range of work experience, formerly in Hasbro and more recently at Disney. He has advertised for a lot of things across creative assets and consumer products, and you're also familiar with Disneyland. So we're excited to talk to him and learn some insights from about marketing and storytelling in that.
Before we do that, Kev, let's get into learnings.
Well, my learning is that, reaching out to people is hard and people don't always respond. And I need to figure out ways that can effectively deliver our ideas and, storytell ourselves better to get people on board with our goals and our message.
Yeah, persistency is key. And even with this, as we gain more listeners and we gain more users and we have some amazing speakers, it's still important that we stay persistent when we try to get these people and making sure that, above all, they have a great story to tell. And so far, I'm really excited about the people we have lined up.
Well, now that we're all excited, let's get to it. Here comes Chris. So to start us off, Chris, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your story?
Well, I'm from the San Fernando Valley. I was pretty good at math, thought I'd become a public accountant upon graduation. In the second day of training at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I realized that I was not passionate about public accounting. So beginning 2 days into my professional career, I've made it a point to follow my passion, and that led me to marketing. I stumbled upon that and realized I was infinitely more passionate about marketing. I've worked at H.J. Heinz over the years in marketing. Most recently, I've been at the Walt Disney Company the last 12 years in various marketing roles across the movie studio, the merchandise division, and now more recently at the Disneyland Resort. That's my journey. I learned along the way to follow your passion.
What I love about the Disney parks is that everything's an experience, whether it's just walking in, the music, the atmosphere. Can you tell us a little bit about building that experience and why every single little detail is so important when marketing and working in the parks?
Well, I wish I could take credit for those details, Gora, but it's really our Walt Disney Imagineering team. They're the ones who are tasked with the idea of bringing our intellectual property or our character franchises and our films to life in the parks. So they take that two-dimensional film and translate that into 3 dimensions in our parks around the world. They're really creative individuals, but we always pride ourselves on those details that you mentioned. And if you go into a western part of the theme park, you're going to see in the cement little horseshoe prints and little tracks that tell you you're in the Wild West, or you'd see different images in the cement if you were in Fantasyland or in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So just even the little indentations in the cement in the various portions of the park. 9 out of 10 people wouldn't notice that, but for those who do, it just makes them love the Disney parks experience even more. So we really try to, with our Walt Disney Imagineering partners, really pay great attention to detail, because that's really what helps set us apart, to your point. We don't get a lot of letters complimenting us on the quality of the $14 cheeseburger. What we do tend to get letters on is the incredible experience people have and how well they were treated by, we call our employees cast members. And more often than not, that letter is about a cast member really making a magical day for that guest. And, since we're talking about storytelling, if you go back to when Disneyland opened in 1955, Walt Disney hired a gentleman named Van France. And Van France was the person who came up with our purpose, the same purpose that all of our tens of thousands of parks employees around the world use today. And the purpose that Van pitched to Walt and his brother Roy was that when you open Disneyland in 1955, let's have every employee, let's have their purpose be to create happiness when the guest enters the park. And if you talk to our cast members today, they may say, my job is to make magic, or my job is to create happiness, or I try to make the guest happy. They play it back in different ways, but all of the employees at Disneyland know that their purpose is to create happiness, whether you're a pastry chef or the monorail driver, or if you work in finance, or even people like me in marketing. We all come to work with that one purpose. And I think that's what makes the park so special, is Van France's contribution back in 1955 to say we're going to have one purpose, and we still have that same purpose across all of our parks today. And I think that purpose is in some ways an extension of storytelling, that we are going to tell this story to all of our cast, that we are going to create happiness for everyone who comes to visit.
Yeah, purpose and storytelling and mission driven, and making sure that everyone is kind of centered around the mission as an organization grows is something that we are really discovering is so important to keeping that core values, and especially with someone like Disney Parks, especially like for me, we used to go for our birthdays a lot, and then you have those birthday pins. Everyone says happy birthday, and
Yes,
it's the little things.
makes you feel really special, just that. And think about a little button like that. How much does a little button cost to make, and how did that little button make you feel? Little cost, big emotion, big return. So great example. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
A narrative that, draw connections with people. That's, what tends to be people will remember the most. And stories are what Disney is rich with. There are so many iconic characters and IPs, like from Mickey Mouse to Star Wars and Marvel, and there are so many products and experiences circled around that that consumers and fans enjoy so much. And so something I want to know from that is, from the marketing standpoint, how do you market these products and experience in a way that extend the original story while staying true to the story that they originated from?
Well, I think a great example of that, Kevin, is the biggest ever expansion of Disneyland Resort here, the 14-acre edition of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge in 2019. We had the same exact 14-acre edition to Walt Disney World. That's taking an original core IP like Star Wars, and with the help of our Imagineers, extending that story with a whole new planet called Batuu, and new characters that you'll meet on Batuu, and new experiences that you've not encountered before as a Star Wars fan. So I think to bring that new land to life, it's an outpost, it's a new planet that the Star Wars fans have not visited before. I think that's a classic extension of the story. And of course, within the parks now, you can experience it in three-dimensional form, and actually taste the blue milk, and pick up a lightsaber and encounter Kylo Ren on the planet Batuu. So you're taking your core IP and being true to it, but the Imagineers do such a good job of extending the story. And I think Galaxy's Edge has just set the bar so high now within the world of the theme parks. It really is experiential. You're almost within the story itself, experiencing Star Wars now when you come to Galaxy's Edge, which is really cool.
No, I mean, I love Galaxy's Edge. It's one of those amazing things with, like we talked about, the little details in the parks. Like, I know one little detail is that they don't actually sell any like Star Wars branded merchandise. It's all a part of the world. Like, you can't buy a Star Wars movie in that area, but you can buy parts of it.
That's a great point, because if you need a plastic lightsaber, you have to go to Earth to buy that. If you're on Batuu, you would buy a little toy that the natives of the planet have handcrafted and sewn in character and in story from a Batu standpoint. That's a great point. The Imagineers just did a brilliant job of that with some of the little plush toys that the locals have crafted for you to purchase, or the blue milk.
So
Even the Sprite and the Coke cans are in the shape of orbs, as if you're on the planet Batu. You wouldn't buy a Coke bottle the way you would on the planet Earth. It's really well done.
I mean, in your opinion, why is that so important? Why is it so important that they're specific to those details instead of like having one little stand that sells the movies or something?
Oh, I think, as you watch Star Wars fans, Gaurav, as you watch true Star Wars fans who've grown up with the books and the video games and the films, as you see them come onto the planet of Batu, and you see them experience this with the sights and the sounds and the architecture and the blue milk and the Coke bottles in the shape of orbs, they get emotional. I mean, it's a dream come true to finally be able to experience Star Wars in three-dimensional form, where so far your whole life to date, it's only been experienced in a two-dimensional format, whether that be on the page of a book or the screen in a theater or watching a film on Disney Plus. They're so emotional when they finally get to come in and experience their favorite property of all time in three-dimensional form. And that's where the tears flow as they enter that part of the resort for a true Star Wars fan. It's quite remarkable.
I love that. I love that idea of just being emotion driven, and it's a whole nother layer when you think of the parks. And I definitely think experiential storytelling is huge in the parks, but adding that emotional connection to true fans is such an important factor.
Yes. And to your point, I mean, the parks have been built upon emotion, but Galaxy's Edge just takes it to a whole new level thanks to our Imagineering partners.
So kind of on that topic as well, about working with iconic IPs, you have worked with the iconic brand of Disney princesses. And what's such an interesting aspect of this brand is it's been enduring over decades and this very long time. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it's not just about amazing stories, but it's about caretakers that over the years cultivating it and making sure it stays consistent and modernizing it. So can you tell us about kind of the weight of marketing a brand like that and how you modernize it?
Yeah, it's a big responsibility, Gaurav, and you have to be true to the characters and true to the original films, whether it's Snow White from Snow White from the 30s or Cinderella from the 50s or Tangled 10 years ago. It's so important to treat these iconic princess characters with care. And I think a lot of the reason why these characters are so appealing still today is not only are they great heroines, but the storytelling is so wonderful in Snow White and Cinderella and all of these films over the years. So we try to keep each princess distinct and focus on their own story, and then bring them all together in this merchandise collection called Disney Princess. But it's a big responsibility, but storytelling, I think the storytelling behind these films plays a big role in their success, no doubt. There's kind of a little known fact that, when you talk about storytelling, probably my favorite Walt story ever relates to the very first princess film, Snow White. And the story goes, I won't do a good job of retelling it, but I'll give it my best shot. But in 1933, he took 40 of his best animators and he gave them 50 cents to go out and get a great steak dinner after work, which would probably be the equivalent of giving everyone a $100 bill today. And they all went out and had a great steak dinner. They used their 50 cents and they all came back to the studio in a great mood. And Walt sat down at about 8 p.m. and he told them a story. He told the story for 3.5 hours from 8 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. He voiced every character himself in the story. He even did the sound effects if it was like a crackle of lightning. And at the end of the 3.5 hours, those 40 animators for the first time were introduced to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Animators who've been recorded 10 to 20 years ago who were still living and were at that meeting that night in 1933 to hear Walt's story and his vision behind what he envisioned this movie to be, said, "We did the best we could, but the movie did not do justice to the story we were told that night." The movie won an Academy Award, one of our most beloved animated films ever. It was the first feature-length film. Up until that point, cartoons were only 5 minutes in length, and you'd watch them before the feature film began in a theater. That was the first 90-minute feature-length cartoon. And it would probably not have been successful if Walt wasn't such a good storyteller, and if he hadn't inspired those 40 individuals that night and told the story in a 3.5-hour format at the studio. That's my favorite Walt story ever. So if you're a leader and you want to lay out your vision with where you want to take your team, storytelling, whether it's a movie or a new direction you want your team to proceed, maybe a little bit of a different shift in direction versus where your team is headed today, storytelling as a leader is just absolutely critical, as evidenced by that story about Walt and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So
yeah, absolutely. And this just really shows that, stories and storytelling is in the genes of Disney, and everything from there. It's really a company that has inherited that gene and builds all of its products and experiences around the core. That is the great storytelling of Walt Disney himself.
Can you tell me a little bit about when you're given a product or given a toy, when you're working more on the toy side to market, what are the similar characteristics you look for to find the essence of a toy to figure out to market?
Gaurav, going back to storytelling, as we're talking this podcast, we would look to the properties that we felt had the best stories. And, to use Star Wars, for example, only Luke Skywalker and his lightsaber and the power of the Force can overcome the evil Darth Vader, a classic good versus evil storyline, very easy to understand. Should we license? Because in licensing, you have to give some of your sales to the licensor. And in the case of Jurassic World, that would be to Steven Spielberg. The story for Jurassic World is that you as a little boy or girl can capture and subdue the dinosaurs and, return Jurassic World to normalcy. The dinosaurs have broken out, they've gotten loose. So it's up to you, the little boy or girl, with your toys and your vehicles and your nets to capture and subdue those dinosaurs and return the world back to a wonderful place again. So, but that story is how we developed the toys, and we would have Jeeps that had capture nets, and the action figures would have stun guns to subdue the dinosaurs. So that storytelling was a big part of us deciding which properties to pursue, like a Jurassic World, or maybe not to pursue on the licensing front at Hasbro.
So such a similarity with the parks, it's about taking the person and making them feel a part of the story, making them feel that emotional connection, like they're beating the bad guy or they're in the world.
Yes. And so to your point, when you enter Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland, the music, the Imagineering team just refurbished the castle a year or two back. It looks gorgeous. But when you walk into that castle, the music, the textures, the sights, the sounds, all make you feel as if you are really a princess or a prince living inside Sleeping Beauty Castle. All emotion, to your point, Gaurav.
I think that's awesome that, the products or experiences are in fact to the little kids who are enjoying it, a great epic story where they are the hero and they are, conquering this great quest or feat, or they're part of the amazing stories.
I was at ground zero, Kevin, when the first Frozen film came out in theaters in Thanksgiving 2013, and I was a pretty big proponent of the Frozen film and its ability to translate to merchandise. But you really never know until the film hits. You just can't research test the film that way as it relates to merchandise. So I was ready to go on Frozen but Elsa turned out to be such a strong, empowering female character, and the song Let It Go and this coming of age story of her at the height of the film. We were ready. We thought it would be enormous, but the demand for Elsa in that film and its merchandise was not enormous. It was unprecedented. And that's really what led to that Frozen phenomena. It was just an incredible character, an incredible story, and like many Disney classics, just had an incredible soundtrack to help augment that storytelling with the beautiful music. So I think she's my favorite character that I've ever worked on at Hasbro or Disney, and to oversee the merchandise for that film, needless to say, we were moving pretty quickly with our factories in China to catch up to the consumer demand for that character Elsa and her blue dress throughout 2014. It was, you don't get to work on a phenomena very often, but I was very fortunate to be overseeing Frozen at that time for Disney throughout 2014. Definitely a career highlight.
Frozen was insane. Like it was an amazing movie, and no one saw the kind of impact it would have worldwide.
Yeah. I think Lion King, when Lion King came out in 1994, that was probably the biggest merchandise property I've ever seen in my career. I never thought it would be repeated. And the advantage Frozen had, Gaurav, that Lion King did not have was the internet. So Frozen had a nice box office opening, but as the film grew and the internet spread the song virally and the imagery, and once you start to see Marines singing Let It Go down at Camp Pendleton, and that video goes viral, it took on a life of its own thanks to the internet. And I feel that in our culture around the world, it actually did become as big, if not arguably bigger than The Lion King in 1994. Both brilliant films from Disney, but I think the internet maybe helped propel Frozen to even new heights. And Lion King, of course, in 1994 did not have the benefit of the internet to help propel it across the world.
So I mean, that had to be so fast paced, kind of keeping up with the man, getting things out. Any key lessons you learned from that experience?
I would say trust your instincts. I really felt, given all my experience at Hasbro and assessing properties and seeing films in rough form, I really felt it was going to be enormous. And I had to make that call 6 months before the movie came out to get ready. And again, you can't consumer test it. You can't do market research. You just have to trust your instincts. And I really trusted my instincts to say this is going to be enormous. And I was probably the biggest proponent of Frozen within our merchandise division at the time. And again, as big of a proponent, as big of a cheerleader as I was still wrong, because it was much bigger than even I thought it was going to be. But at least we were ready to go. Gaurav, Kevin, we were ready to go. We knew it was going to be big. And then when it was even bigger than we thought, we, of course, hustled even faster. But we weren't surprised by its success. We were just surprised by the scale of the success, the scale of the appeal across the world, and the fact that the internet helped it grow and grow and grow each month that passed and made it more and more popular. Where normally when a movie comes out in theaters, it gets less and less and less popular each month that goes by after it's released in a theater. This was just the opposite. It was absolutely crazy.
I mean, you bring up such an interesting point with the internet and technology propelling stories and giving us a profound impact for a story to go worldwide. And it's just such a fascinating.
Absolutely. And I think, in certain parts of the world, it was not as popular at the outset as the United States. And I think the internet helped other parts of the world see how powerful Frozen was, to the point where a year or two after the movie was released, it was equally popular in all parts of the world, thanks to the internet and its ability to spread the excitement of that film. So
yeah, for sure.
Definitely a career highlight to get to be involved with Elsa and Frozen, for sure.
I mean, I'm from China, and little girls in China also want to be Elsa when Halloween comes. So it's definitely having a worldwide and long-lasting impact, and just amazing how a story and the way we promote stories can really influence the world in a really profound way.
Yeah. You know, Kevin, I was in Shanghai in 2019. I lived there for 3 months, and I was surprised by how popular Frozen was in China. It was more popular in 2019 in China than the United States. Now, it may not have been that way in 2014, but slowly over time, the internet, you know, showed the Chinese culture and the people just how popular this film could become. So it's actually arguably in some ways, before Frozen 2 came along, it was more popular in China than the United States when I was there in the summer of 19. So
Yeah, that's amazing.
So
to close our episode, we have this segment called Suspenders. It worked like this. We ask you a random question that's unrelated to anything. Hopefully it's fun, and you can give any random answer that you feel like.
sounds good. Sounds good.
So our random question of the day is, what is your most magical moment from the year 2020?
You know, we've had a lot of people impacted by furloughs at our parks around the world. And I think just being able to really care for my cast and my team, Kevin, many of them have been going through some hard times. Many parks employees around the world have been furloughed. Many of my team members at Disneyland are married to fellow Disneyland employees. So just, I think it's been a tough year, but I think I've really learned the importance of empathy. And there's nothing more important than caring for someone on your team. And if I could say one lesson to all aspiring leaders listening today, you cannot care enough for your team in ordinary times and during this pandemic to really care and show empathy to my team. Some of them were forced overnight to become homeschool teachers. One person on my team was in big meetings with her 2-year-old son on her lap. And I'd say, you know, don't be embarrassed by your son on your lap. Let's just talk about the topic at hand. It's no big deal that your son's joining us in the Zoom call. So it was just a tough year. So I just think my biggest magical moment was just really caring for my team. And I think just trying to make a little difference and make it a little bit easier for them to work with us at Disney. I really learned a lot about leadership this past year and the importance of empathy and care. So
it's such a great message for this COVID world and how important it is that we care for each other and we empathize with each other. Welcome to Top Hat. This is the part of the podcast where we sit down and analyze some of the amazing learnings we just got from an expert storyteller. This week we had Disney marketing exec Chris Connolly. So why don't we jump straight into some of our learnings? I think first and foremost, the way he talked about the organization and people at Disney was really telling. The role the cast members play in building that experience at the parks, and all going back to Von Franz's idea of the purpose is to create happiness, and making sure that even as Disney grows, making sure that every single cast member is focused on that story, that purpose of making people happy, and tying them all together with that story is so important. It's a great part of what makes that experience so great.
Yeah, and from the stories, every minute detail, every dent on the cement, every piece of merchandise you get, they're all tied to the story and the theme. That is how you create a cohesive experience that really sticks to the spirit and the core of the stories and IPs you create. And I just think that's so amazing.
Making sure every minute detail is cohesive to the experience. Even just walking through a Disney park, walking through Galaxy's Edge, you're part of that story. So that brings us to learning number 3, remembering that every product, every story, every ride is all an extension of that original story. He talked about this when he talked about the Jurassic Park toys. When they're designing toys, when they're designing parks, looking back to the story and saying, how can we build something that will make a fan a part of the story? How can we build a toy that will make the fan feel the hero, feel like he's the hero, bringing them into the story? So hopefully next time you're at the Disney parks, you see it a little bit differently. You see how every single piece is an extension of the story, how every single employee is dedicated to that making people happiness purpose, and how that all contributes to that amazing experience that is Disney parks.
This has been another great episode of Linen Suit and Plastic Tie.
We'll see everyone next week.